Good morning. This is your Bible lesson for March 30th, Monday, March 30th. We have been in 1 Samuel. We're almost done with it, and we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 29. We left off on a cliffhanger last time where David was David had been raiding in the lands around the land of the Philistines, like fighting against the Amalekites and the Geshurites and all the different ites. And the Philistines he'd come back, and because he was living in the land of the Philistines, escaping from Saul at the time. And Achish, the king of the Philistines, would say, "Hey, what have you been doing today?" And David would say, "Oh, I've been attacking these, this area of Judah and this area of Judah, and fighting against this city." And Achish was like, "Oh, this is great. Israel's going to hate him. This is so great. He'll never be able to go back." When in actuality, he was attacking Israel's enemies and helping Israel out. So he's got this scheme going on for a long time. But our schemes only last so long because Achish, it always gets found out. Achish said to him, "Hey, guess what, David? We're going to war with Israel. And, you've been fighting against Israel for months now. Why don't you come with us? You would love to attack Israel, right?" And so David has a real dilemma, because if he says, "No, I don't want to attack Israel," then they're going to know he was lying, and they're probably going to attack him. If he says, "Sure, I'll attack Israel," now he's going to have to attack them. And so Achish comes to him and he says, "Sure, I'll attack Israel." And so now he's got a choice. Is he actually going to go through with it or not? Because this would be a big deal. If he attacks Israel, how is he going to be king over Israel afterward? And so he's, the next day, chapter 29 now. "And the Philistines gathered together all their armies at Aphek, and the Israelites encamped by a fountain which is in Jezreel." This was actually pretty distressing to the Israelites, because this is deep in Israel. This is pretty deep in Israel. So if they've gotten this deep into Israel, this is a real serious threat. And we know what Saul had been doing last chapter. Remember, Saul had been seeking after a witch to try to find out what's going on and seek after Samuel and see what because God wasn't answering him, and he found out he was going to die. But we're leaving Saul, and we're going to David right now. And so David comes and shows up at the battle. And it says, "And the lords of the Philistines passed in review by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men passed in review at the rear with Achish." So what they would do is that they kind of would pass and they'd kind of walk through almost like a parade before the generals and the kings of the Philistines, and they would come and walk and see all the army and try to catch anybody that doesn't look like they're ready or different things like that, and they'd see the strongest guy, go, "Oh yeah, there we go," and put him at the front and everything. So verse 3, "Then the princes of the Philistines, they saw David and his men." And as I mentioned before, David is one of the most famous men in Israel for being a great hero in the defeat of Goliath, but he's one of the most famous men in the land of the Philistines as well, for the same thing, but in the opposite way. He's famous for the defeat of Goliath, but as a not a hero, but a villain. And so they see David and his men, and they say, princes of the Philistines say, "What is this Hebrew doing here? What are these Hebrews doing here?" And Achish said, "Oh, don't worry about it." He said, "Is this not David, the servant of the king of Saul, who has been with me these days or these years? And to this day I've found no fault in him since he defected with me." He basically said, "Yeah, it's David, but he defected to me. He's on my side now. He fights for me." And so, but the princes of the Philistines were angry. And they said, they said, "Make this fellow return, that he may go back to the place which you have appointed him, and do not let him go down with us to battle, lest he become our adversary. For with what could he reconcile himself to his master, if not with the heads of these men?" So they said to Achish, "No, we're not going to let him fight." They said, "If he's escaped from Israel, and if he's been at odds with his king in Israel, then what it probably is that they have some sort of fight, and you know what? He could make it up by turning against us in battle, and then his king will be like, hey, great job. I will, we're good now. You've made it up to me. And then they're like, we shouldn't trust him. We can beat these Israelites without him. And so and they even cited that song, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000. So in verse 6, Achish called David and said to him, surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and you're going out and you're coming in with me in the army is good in my sight, for to this day I have not found it evil in you, the day of your coming. So basically saying, David, you're awesome, you've been great, you've been a hard worker, you've been upstanding, but nevertheless the Lord's do not favor you. He goes, but they won't let you fight with us. And David said to Achish, he goes, but what have I done? And to this day, what have you found in your servant as long as I have been with you, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of the Lord the king? And so David feels a huge amount of rejection here because he's already been rejected by Saul. All he wants to do is serve. He wants to be useful and wants to serve. Unfortunately, right now it's with the Philistines, but he had wanted to serve Saul, and Saul rejected him. He wanted to kill him. Now he's trying to serve Achish, and Achish now is basically rejecting him. Sorry, man, you can't come with us. And he's like, I'm just trying to be helpful. I just want to do something. And he says, Achish says back to David, I know that you are as good in my sight as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the princes of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up with us to battle. Now, therefore, rise early in the morning with your master's servants who've come to you, and as soon as you are up early in the morning and have light, depart. And so we see here, and back in verse 7, it says, therefore go now in peace, that you may not displease the Lord to the Philistines. It's kind of funny because this is something, displeasing the Lord to the Philistines, was something that David, when he was walking with the Lord, remember I've talked about the roller coaster of David? He's definitely in one of his low points right now. And when he was at his high point, when he was, defeating Goliath, um, he was defeating Goliath, he would have said, "Oh, is this going to displease the Lord to the Philistines? That's fine. I'm fine. I'm purposely wanting to displease the lords of the Philistines. That's great. Let me know if I ever do anything not to displease the lords of the Philistines, because I'm going to start doing more and displeasing the lords of the Philistines even more." That would be his attitude before, because he's like, why do I care about the lords of the Philistines? But now he's being careful, and he's like, oh, I don't want to displease the lords of the Philistines there. And so it's really a low point, and you think it couldn't get any lower, but then we go to chapter 30. Chapter 30, now it happened so David at this point has been running from Saul. Saul has seemingly almost killed him several times. Saul is like a father figure to him, by the way. Saul is like the dad he never, he had a dad with Jesse, but he was almost like, he was really close to him. He's the armor bearer, he's looking up to him, he's the king, and Saul rejects him, tries to kill him. His own wife, his first wife, Michal, has been given to another. She's gone. He's on the run for his life. He has to escape to the land of the Philistines. Now the Philistine king has rejected him, and he's feeling worse and worse and worse. And now it happened in chapter 30, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag and attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire. So as if it wasn't enough, all the rejection and awful times that David has gone through, he comes back home, and you can picture as they're a few miles away, they're at least like they're all really upset and they're sad, but they're like, at least we can get home and spend some time with our wives and our children and get a little bit of rest. It's really hard. It's going to be really hard, but at least they can spend some time at home. And they're exhausted from their travels, and they come back and they lift up their eyes, and what do they see? They see smoke on the horizon, smoke rising from where they knew Ziklag was. And they come back, and they begin to run, and they run and they run. And they come back and they see all of their homes burnt to the ground. And they're just, the only thing left is just heaps of wood burning and piles of wood burning and smoke going up in the air. All their possessions gone. Their wives and kids taken. Okay, so they were kidnapped. Their wives and kids kidnapped. And they would have been very upset, if you can picture. They're exhausted, come back from battle, and they feel rejected, and they feel really, really sad. And they feel like they can't be any more sad, and it gets worse. All their wives and kids, they don't know if they're alive or dead. They're not there, and they're gone. And all their homes are burnt to the ground. They have no more homes. They have nowhere to sleep. They have nothing anymore. And so David, and they have no idea. Now we know that it was the Amalekites, but they literally have no idea who even did it. Verse 3, so David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. They'd been kidnapped. And David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. You know, this is when you are just so unbelievably, inconsolably sad that you cry so much you don't even have the power to cry anymore. You've cried beyond your capacity to cry. You know, it gets to a point when you're so sad that you cry and cry and tears flow, and you just get to the point that you have no tears left. You're almost just numb. That's like beyond sad. It's like it's just the point of being so upset you almost can't function. But they have to function. Their wives and their children, their families are gone. And verse 6, now David was greatly distressed. And you think it's gotten the worst part, right? So David was greatly distressed at this, but then you know what he hears? He's upset. He's crying for his wives and kids that he has. I don't know if he has kids at this point, but all the men. And David knows he's even more upset than the other men because David knows it's his fault because he decided that he wanted to go and fight with the Philistines. He's thinking that all these men's wives and kids might be gone forever, might be dead, and he knows it's his fault. How awful do you think he felt knowing that because he decided he wanted to go fight with the Philistines, because he wanted to move to the land of the Philistines, he's supposed to be the leader, that all of this is his fault, and that all these people were taken because of him. Now picture this, verse 6. David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him because the soul of the people was grieved. Okay? So not only was he rejected by Saul and tried to be killed by his mentor, the guy he loved greatly as king. Not only was he responsible for all those priests at Nob, or he felt responsible, at least he really wasn't, but he felt responsible for all those priests at Nob being killed. Not only that, did he feel like he had to leave his homeland, and go to the land of the Philistines. Not only that, did he have to deal with the thought of fighting against his countrymen. Not only that, now Achish has rejected him. He kind of used Achish, it seems, like a replacement for Saul in his life, to just a king to serve. He's been rejected by him. Not only that, his house is burnt down. Not only that, his wives and kids, if he has any, are stolen away from him. Not only that, the men speak of stoning him. What stoning is when a person who was a criminal or something would be put into a lower pit, and everybody else would gather around, and they would pick up these large rocks and they'd throw them as hard at the person as they possibly could, and they would keep throwing rocks until the person died. They would kill you by throwing rocks right at your face. And if you think about it, that's a very, very painful way to die. So these 600 men, spoke of stoning him. This is about as low as you can get. But what do we see happen in verse 6? But David strengthened himself in the Lord. David strengthened himself in God. We hadn't seen the last couple of chapters when he was serving Achish. Ever since he entered the land of the Philistines, we didn't see him strengthen himself in the Lord, seek after God with the ephod. We didn't see any of that. But he gets to the end of his rope, and he begins to strengthen himself in God. And sometimes it takes us getting to a really difficult place, a really tough place, to get us to wake up. Sometimes God uses bad circumstances. God never wants to have to use bad circumstances, but sometimes he does, because it's the only thing that can get us to wake up and go, what am I doing? And he uses that to rescue us out of where we've been. And so David is like woken up here. The last time he wakes up was after the priests at Nob were killed. Now he wakes up and goes, what am I doing? What am I doing? I need God here. I've been trying to seek my own will and figure everything out myself. And so he strengthens himself in the Lord and tells, and verse 7 has Abiathar, Ahimelech's son, bring the ephod and starts to seek after God. And we're going to see, how can God possibly turn this whole thing around? What could he possibly do to fix this situation. We're going to see that next time.